everybody. First of all, can everybody hear me? You guys can hear me in the back? Good afternoon and welcome to Protest for Freedom. We are just 1 week away from the largest protest of our generation in Trafalgar Square next Saturday at noon. But before... Hello, you can't cheer for that, can you? It's the biggest protest of our generation. But before all of that, this afternoon we're going to take a look at the facts, evidence and questions that our government and mainstream media have done such a poor job in answering through the so-called pandemic. Why has government advice in regards to masks, gloves, social distancing and their effectiveness in fighting corona completely U-turned in the last 4 months? How, by complying with COVID regulations, you are backing state-funded science and putting your life in the hands of the same media and government who continuously lie to you. And maybe most important of all, what you can do to take a stand against tyranny and corruption on both a local and national level. In fact, we have all of this and so much more for you. But before we get started, we would like to thank the Portsmouth City Police and councils and granting us a permit to be here today. And we would also like to thank the council for turning off the British Library Club, BBC behind us. However, there's always a but with these. However, when it came to us asking for the screen off, despite the majority of us here being Portsmouth City council taxpayers, we were told to pay an extortionate fee, proving once again that the only thing that matters to the establishment is taking money out of each and every one of your pockets. And I guess in some ways, with no biohazard bins in the streets, empty hospitals and thousands of doctors and nurses around the country speaking out, as well as the lack of science to back up just about everything they are telling you, how did we even know that there was a pandemic if it wasn't for our courageous mainstream media? However, as we get the permit, it is important to mention, if you want to wear a mask, if you want to social distance, it is your choice. Because unlike the other side, no one here today is going to tell you what to do. We are simply going to ask you to think for yourselves. Our first speaker has come from Brighton today. She is a free thinker and she's been there alongside all of us at the High Fridays. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my friend Sarah Lindsay!
Hello everyone. So here we are in the midst of COVID 1984. Perhaps the largest psychological operation the world has ever seen. I am standing here today as an impassioned person who cares deeply about humanity and the trajectory that we as society are on at this time. As a mother of 2, I care deeply about my children's future. I want them to grow up in a free and just world. I want them to have the same opportunities as me, and I want them to live in a world free from tyranny, dictatorships, a treasonous government, and health fascism. As someone who has worked supporting people for most of my working life, as someone who chose to embark on this vocation due to my empathy for others facing greater challenges than me, I stand for human rights, justice, fairness, and the truth. I will not accept the insane rules and restrictions brought in by our oppressive government. Look at where we are now. We were told back in March, 3 weeks to flatten the curve. Remember that? And yet here we are, 6 months on. We are now in the midst of local lockdowns, new, unjustified and unscientific rules, and we're being threatened that if we don't follow their arbitrary and baseless rules, Boris will cancel Christmas. Are we, the people of the UK, going to stand for this? Well, I, for one, am not going to. I knew from the outset that something was wrong, and I warned people back in March that the lockdown and the restrictions would kill and harm many more than any so-called virus. So today I want to focus on the extent of harm caused by the first lockdown and the ongoing repercussions from this. I feel that this is especially important at this time, given that we are facing greater restrictions over autumn and winter, and indeed another national lockdown, which is now being mentioned in the mainstream media. We should be learning from the past unlawful lockdown. The extent of harm on people often goes unreported or is given very little exposure by the mainstream media, who, let's face it, have done a brilliant job of spreading fear and panic over a virus which, if you get it, has a greater than 99% recovery rate. The lockdown itself has caused total devastation to the lives of so many. There is a mental health charity called SANE. Now calls to SANE's telephone helpline have increased by 200% since the lockdown began. Marjorie Wallace, who founded the charity, said she had never known anything like it. Speaking in May, she said, "In the last month, the levels of distress, the acute anxiety and the feelings of helplessness have reached a new threshold. For people with mental health problems, the increased isolation of a lockdown could be the final tipping point. For people with mental health problems, a key to successfully managing their illness involves getting out and meeting people, engaging in meaningful activity, and maintaining supportive relationships with friends and family. The impact of social isolation on vulnerable people who need access to services, groups, and others in the community cannot be underestimated. Day services have been closed. Community groups have ceased to run. Support services have been reduced, and befriending services are not visiting people in person. All of these services are a lifeline to so many people. We have thousands of people who are now socially isolated, and I know how devastating the effect of this can be on a person's mental health and emotional well-being. How many patients have been admitted to psychiatric hospitals because of the impact of the lockdown? I'm not sure we will ever know. However, in May, the Royal College of Psychiatrists said that they were seeing an alarming rise in patients needing urgent and emergency care, and they forecast a tsunami of mental illness. 43% of psychiatrists have seen an increase in urgent and emergency cases following the COVID-19 lockdown. At this time, the Office of National Statistics found that almost 50% of the population of Great Britain have reported high levels of anxiety. Psychiatrists stated that older people with a need for psychiatric care were too fearful to seek help, and the admitted patients had more severe psychotic symptoms, often relating to COVID. Many patients had developed mental disorders as a direct result of the lockdown. social isolation, increased stress, and running out of medication. Now, when you know that the fear and the panic has been purposefully generated by the government through the use of the mainstream media, and that applied behavioural psychology has been utilised by the government to increase the personal perceived threat, it makes the perpetrators criminals. Now, all of that is based on a SAGE, that's a Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, document from March. It's no conspiracy theory. Reported on in May by the alternative and independent news source UK column, one of the presenters was aghast when he was explaining this. He said, "I can't believe this is happening in the UK. It's the sort of thing that you would expect out of communist China." The policies that have been brought in on the back of the so-called COVID pandemic include some healthcare providers who were imposing blanket bans on cardiopulmonary resuscitation. And it transpired that many of these had been imposed due to the pandemic, without consultation with their patient or their family. A court case was launched in May against University Hospital Cambridge NHS Foundation Trust. It was taken to the High Court and the Court of Appeal after a woman who had terminal lung cancer had a do not attempt resuscitation notice put on her records at Aidan Brooks Hospital without consultation. How many more people have had do not attempt resuscitation notices placed on their records by clinicians with no consultation with the patient or their family as a result of the COVID pandemic? It's not just in hospitals either. Care home residents have been categorised en masse as not requiring resuscitation. People in care homes in Hove, East Sussex and South Wales are among those who had do not attempt resuscitation notices added to their care plans without proper consultation with them or their families. Care homes in Leeds reported that district nurses had been asking them to revisit do not resuscitate conversations with people who said they did not want them. A reporter in May said that after a visit from the GP, all 20 of their residents in a care home in Wales had do not attempt resuscitation notices attached to their care plans. Amid all the propaganda about how important it was to protect the NHS, vulnerable people were sent do not attempt resuscitation notice agreement forms through the post, and there were numerous reports of these being completed en masse without the older people's consent in care settings, automatically excluding vulnerable people from hospital treatment. How many of these DNAR notices were applied after appropriate consultation with the patient or family? Why was there a blanket push for DNARs to be applied for certain groups of people? The government and health authorities need to be held accountable for this despicable disregard for human rights. Another quite sinister blanket push during the COVID pandemic has been the prescribing of specific end-of-life medications to those in care homes. There has been a national drive to prescribe 2 end-of-life medications to residents of care homes, morphine and midazolam. Now, I hadn't heard of midazolam, so I looked it up. It's a benzodiazepine, and the information that I read stated that if it is administered with an opiate, that's the morphine, it has a high risk of slowing or stopping breathing. Again, with the DNARs, it appears that this has been a national drive and was undertaken due to GPs not going to visit residents in care homes. Indeed, many are still not visiting patients in care homes even now. So we have end-of-life medication prescribed to older people in care homes in the event that they contracted COVID and deteriorated. There have been reports of these medications being administered inappropriately. And I think having a blanket prescription of medication that essentially kills someone is deeply worrying, especially if this has been done without the appropriate consultation. It's despicable and it's an outrage that care home residents have been isolated from friends and family. Imagine how a resident may feel if they are stopped from seeing their spouse or their children. And this goes especially for people with dementia. It is nothing less than a feeling of abandonment. It is inhumane. We need to be questioning the impact on care home residents, quality of life and human rights. Article 8 of the Human Rights Act is right to private and family life. I would say that the interference in this human right is unjustified. Indeed, this restriction on visitors does not appear to have protected many in care homes, and yet their quality of life has been impacted upon so greatly. In care homes, those who are suspected to have COVID, those discharged from hospital and those admitted to the care home were and are isolated in their bedrooms for 14 days. In an article published by The Guardian in May, one carer was reported as saying, "The virus won't be the killer of these people. It's the distress and fear of not seeing family that's doing it." Many care homes stopped residents mixing with others. Some halted or reduced all activities, exercise and therapies. In the absence of face-to-face visits with loved ones, many offered video calling as a way of keeping in touch. However, as 80% of care home residents have dementia, this is not always a realistic or appropriate way of keeping in touch with family members. And of course, nothing beats face-to-face contact. We're social beings and we need it. Another carer reported residents who were giggling, happy and active before the crisis now just lie on their beds or sit alone in their rooms with their doors closed. Many now barely respond when you speak to them. Some shout for their friends or family. Others have given up entirely and are fading away. I ask you, what kind of existence is this? The experience has been incredibly traumatic for so many, and now we have councils writing to care homes in some parts of the country, ordering them to shut their doors to visitors once again. They only just opened. We need more of us questioning the proportionality of the government's response. When are we going to say no more to this disgraceful attitude towards the quality of life of older people in care homes? I have a question. If masks and social distancing work, why are families being stopped from visiting their loved ones? And then you have the reports from people who have sadly lost loved ones who have passed away in hospital from other illnesses and conditions. They were not able to spend their last moments with their relatives. Imagine being told that you cannot be with your dying mother or father. This is unacceptable. Mothers have given birth in hospitals without their partners present. Imagine being told that the father of the baby cannot be present for the birth of his child. Again, this is unacceptable. They do not have our best interests at heart. impact on the nation's health of shutting down the NHS during lockdown and effectively transforming it into a COVID-only service. 700,000 operations were cancelled a week during lockdown. Cancer screenings, routine appointments and procedures were cancelled. At least 2.4 million people missed cancer screening appointments during lockdown. 2.4 million. The NHS Confederation warns that the backlog of planned treatments, including for life-threatening and life-limiting conditions, is likely to hit 10 million. The lockdown regime has also seen cancer referrals drop by 45%. Some scientists have estimated that this could mean an additional 35,000 excess cancer deaths in the UK. There were no fewer people contracting cancer, but the real-world impact of the lockdown regime is that fewer lives will now be saved, while many have undoubtedly already been lost. During the lockdown, presentations for heart attacks and strokes dropped by more than half. This resulted in a huge increase of deaths in the home. It isn't COVID-19 that killed the majority of these people. They lost their lives because they either couldn't or wouldn't access hospital treatment. And of course, for those that wouldn't, it was the incessant propaganda in the mainstream media and by the government, making it clear that hospitals would be overwhelmed. And therefore people felt they were doing their duty to others by staying at home. There is now a tsunami-like wave of people who have missed out on life-sustaining and lengthening treatment. The NHS has been funded through taxpayers. Isn't it their right to access such important healthcare? How many have died or will die as a result of missing life-sustaining treatment? As I said before, the lockdown regime will kill many more than any virus. But of course, that's their plan. If the intention was to protect the most vulnerable, then many lockdown regime policies and decisions were, at best, criminally negligent. In combination, they appear to be suspiciously close to a deliberate programme of euthanasia. Full lockdowns have not been associated with reductions in the number of cases of mortality. Professor Lewitt of Stanford University said that the lockdown saved no lives and may have cost them. Well, we know that's true. Professor Gupta of Oxford University estimates the virus to have a tiny infection fatality rate between 0.01% and 0.1%. Okay. A government report has said up to 200,000 people could die due to the impact and effect of the lockdown. Hospitals have been empty for months. Remember the TikTok videos of nurses dancing, and there is now a backlog of millions of patients waiting to be seen. And of course, there is the loss of jobs, livelihoods, small businesses, and potentially people's homes. We're going to see the unemployment rate rocket once the furlough ends next month. Ask yourself, is it worth people losing their lives, their jobs, their minds, and their businesses over a virus that has such a small fatality rate? As we face the prospect of a further national lockdown, which will no doubt be blamed on people not following the rules, but was in fact the plan all along, let's remember Chris Whitty's words. He said, it's worth reinforcing the fact that the great majority of people won't die from this. A significant proportion of people will not get this virus at all. Of course, of those who get symptoms, 80% are mild or moderate. Even the very highest risk groups, the great majority, if they catch this virus, will not die. So ask yourself, is the reaction that we have seen from the UK government proportionate? Is the impact on people's lives, human rights and health worth paying over a so-called virus that is no risk to the majority of people? So what is my message to you today? And what do I think we need to do? I think we need to hold our treasonous government to account. I think we need...
Drag them into the common law courts.
We need to rise up. Stand up. Defy their rules and any further lockdowns and say no more. Because we are the 99%. We are unstoppable if we rise in unity and come together. They are scared of us. They don't want us knowing the truth. So seek out alternative sources of information. Turn off your TV. Stop reading or listening to the mainstream media. They're all controlled by the 1% and just spurt out the government narrative and keep you in a place of fear and panic. Unite and stand up.
And without a call to the government.
I said at the beginning that I am deeply concerned about my children's future. I want to be able to look my children in the eyes in the future and say I did everything in my power to stop this. And I know I will be able to. The question is, will you? Will not be my new norm. I say, stay calm, uphold the truth, and say no.
Thank you very much. Can we have another big round of applause for Sarah? Our next guest needs absolutely no introduction. His team have been trolling up and down this country, standing up to councils both local and national in a tireless effort to say no to the new normal. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Corbyn! Thank you very much. Well, hello. Are we in good voice? Fantastic. Well, I'm here from StopNewNormal.net, but I'm part of our movement. And our movement is fighting now to build the biggest demonstration you've ever seen in London on the 26th of this month. And you are going to be there. Now, I do want to thank, I just want to say where I've been these last few days. Since September the 5th, I've been in Sheffield, Cardiff, Birmingham, Leicester, Liverpool, Downing Street and Truro. And in Truro, we had the biggest demonstration they've ever seen in Truro. And then last night I was on Camelot TV on an amazing interview which you should stream everywhere. And all this is only possible because of people turning up like you and our team, my team, and I want to thank specifically my team standing in front of us. Here we have Tony, who's been driving, he hasn't broken many speed limits, and Sonia and Marco here, and there's probably others around, but anyway, Diane is here somewhere. Anyway, they've done fantastic.